Hey traders, welcome to the afternoon session, US equity breakdown. So starting with the S&P, as you can see, we are still expecting this deeper pullback toward the 3,000 level. And I suspect that we have started to see the beginnings of the move. As you can see from Thursday last week, we had quite a strong move down and we've gone into a bit of a correction here. That being said, there is still a bit of a scope for perhaps we have misread this price action in the middle, and what we're looking at is a running flat in this region, and we're going to go and test the highs. Obviously, our full target at 33.30 has still not been met, so there's still potential for that. That being said, I still feel that I'm leaning toward more downside here, and there's a couple of pairs that suggest that we're heading lower in the S&P rather than going to test the highs. Moving on to individual equities, AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, we've seen a great move higher. This was one of our top trades at the beginning of the month. We called for a big move up in AMD from around about 52, if I'm not mistaken. And what we've seen is a really strong surge higher. I believe it's on news that Intel is struggling to produce the chips that AMD Micro Devices is already producing. So we saw a big jump higher. That being said, what we're looking for is a dump lower now to complete this structure. Obviously, we could still push quite a bit higher if this becomes an extended wave. We could still see this push as much as kind of 84 before seeing the pullback. But for now, we're looking for any kind of turnaround to the downside to get into a short trade to the downside. And what we said in the beginning of the month, that this is a great trade to the upside, then trade to the downside, and then trade to the upside following the move to downside. Because as you can see, this is a really nice running flat. We're trading the C wave to the downside and looking to push up towards 80 upon completion of this structure. So it's all looking really good to trade both ways. It's a really nice risk reward to the downside if you can get a good entry to the downside, to the short side. And if you can get a good entry, it's obviously a really nice move up towards 80 following all of that. Moving on to Amazon, we had a strong pullback. If you look at the lower timeframes on Amazon, we see we had quite a strong pullback from the highs, and we've gone into another impulsive move up and what looks like a fairly impulsive move down. So it's hard to say exactly where we're at. What I suspect is what we're in is a B wave, and we're going to start to see some choppiness moving forward. Perhaps we see a bit of a flat correction around about this region and then see another drive lower, followed by another impulse up, and this becomes a kind of running flat for more downside. But it's obviously early days, and we'll have to just give this some time to play out and see what occurs. But for now, that's the picture we're looking at, and anything that looks corrective around here in this region and starts to look like a corrective price structure, you would want to get short, because it's a fairly decent move from there down towards, let's say, 2680, 2700, if this plays out this way. So just keep an eye on that, and by Thursday we'll have a much clearer picture of where we're heading. Boeing, really good looking short side trade. We've been calling on this one for quite a while now. This was actually part of our monthly recap at the beginning of the month, and as you can see, what we were expecting in this was this kind of flat pattern, and then this move lower was connected to that one there. And what we've seen is a bit of a slow beginning, and it actually looks like this has started to turn into a corrective triangle before we move to the downside to see this green wave to the downside. So it looks like maybe today, tomorrow, we're going to start to see a strong move to the downside, pushing down towards 140 on Boeing. And then we could see a pop higher, turns all of this into a fairly large running flat, and then from there we continue to the downside. So for now, this beginning of this week, we're looking to get short Boeing, and any break of this trend line is a really interesting move to the downside. As you can see, we don't really talk much about trend lines yet, Seneca, but there's a really interesting trend line that if it's broken should push lower, and then we could see a retest before the continuation to the downside. So just keep an eye on that one. And we're definitely on all pictures are pointing towards more downside for Boeing moving forward. Going to beyond meat, as you can see, we've had a push up, push down from the highs, quite a fairly impulsive move, as you can see from this wave, and we've gone into this corrective structure, and just looks to me like we are in this midst of a running flat for more downside. So we've had a bit of a impulsive move down, and we've gone into this corrective area in this region, kind of between 126 and 135, and now it looks like we're starting to push lower to complete the structure. Then what we will look for following this move, potentially we've seen the lows already. If we get all the way down to 110, we're still going to look for this push higher to complete the structure, and that's definitely the move you want to short. You want to short this rally and get short in down towards below 100. So it's a really nice clean setup being formed here. You just have to pick your entries. There's a decent decent long trade up from here, potentially on an earnings call, but longer term we're looking for the short trade. That's where the money is, that's where the risk reward is, so keep an eye on that. DuPont continues to be in this corrective structure. It kind of looks to me like what we in here is this A, B, C, D, E expanding triangle of a B wave, and then what we're going to get moving forward is this impulse up to match this impulse up. This is just going to be part of the completion to the downside. Following that, which is definitely a tradable move, we should see a push lower to complete this higher degree running flat, or what hopefully turns into a running flat. Obviously, we've been bullish DuPont for several months now, kind of from around about the 40 region, and this is all just an opportunity to get long, because looking at the higher degree structure, you see this really nice clean pattern, and suggests we're going back up to 110, going to go back and test the highs at 110. So this just looks like a really clean structure to get into the long side, and there's some short-term trades to be had before you get long at around about 50, depending on how this structure plays out. So keep an eye on that. EA, another one we looked at the beginning of the month. We were looking for a short trade down towards below 70 at least, and we had this really strong rally up to the highs, and it looked like we were going into this kind of corrective wedge at the highs. Just go back into the hourly. We had this run into what looked like a corrective wedge, and this is potentially the break and retest of the wedge, and now we're heading lower. But the other opportunity, or the other possibility, is that all of this is just an expanding flat, and we might have another push higher towards 142 before we see the move lower. There's some interesting trend lines here, and all of this could just turn into a head and shoulders before we see the downside. So just keep an eye on that. It's a very interesting price action, but the higher time frames just suggest a really strong move down for EA towards that 70 level. So we'll have to just see how things play out. Obviously, we've got the earnings coming up at the end of the month, and that could be a big factor for them moving forward. GDX, as you know, gold has been on a tear, and GDX has followed suit, but it looks to me like the structure is in, and we should see a strong pullback in GDX. It would be a great opportunity to buy GDX at around about 33, and not a bad position to get short if you can find the right entry. So having a look at seeing how things play out in this region, but as you can see, we're starting to get some divergence to the downside. MACD is starting to die off, and the structure is a really nice clean structure for us to trade to the downside and then to get long back to the upside. Same situation in gold, so keep an eye on this. Home Depot, another interesting one. We've had a really strong impulse, and we've gone into this kind of longer drawn out correction. And if you're looking at it, it really matches what the S&P. It's really interesting to see Home Depot basically matches the S&P pip for pip. And we've broken out of this wedge, we've retested this wedge, and now we're in a bit of a consolidation here. So if we see a break of this region, we can trade this as a flag, potentially a break to the downside to follow the rest of the market down to create a nice running flat to then get long back at around about 244. So really nice looking structure if we can see this downside move. I know it is coming. It's just a matter of when is it going to come. Are we going to see a push higher first before we see a pull to the downside? It's all really going to have to do with the broader market, I feel. Looking at biotech, the ETF, this one you really have to look at from a higher degree and go back into the weekly chart. As you can see, our A wave goes back to 2015, 2016. And then we've gone into this corrective structure as a B wave, and it looks like we've topped out on this biotech structure. Going up into the higher time frames, as you see, we had a push higher, correction, push higher, correction, pushed up, didn't really get much out of this running flat, and we had a strong pullback. So this could really be the start of a really big move lower. So look for something corrective so you can get short, because the short should be a really nice one towards full target of around about 90 on this chart. So really nice deep pullback to come, nice risk reward, looking at 34% pullback in biotech. So keep an eye on this, really good looking chart. IBM, one of our shining stars to get long, still performing well. We've had a really nice push higher. Potentially we're just in a bit of a correction here. Keep an eye on this one. If this continues to look corrective, you want to just continue to get long IBM moving forward, because we haven't reached our minimum targets as far as I can tell. Let's just recheck. Yeah, we still have some way to go up to 140, our minimum target, full target 155. So look for a short-term correction and a push higher despite what the market's doing. If you get that, then it's a really good trade. It's looking really strong. Lockheed Martin, similar situation. Our trade played out as we said exactly. We said we were going to dip below these lows at 350 and then take off from there, and that's exactly what's happened. We've seen a nice, really strong 16% rally from the lows, and it looks like we're going to go into a bit of a corrective phase here, and this is definitely something you want to get long again if you can get a good entry. So keep an eye on price action along these lines. Probably for the rest of the week we'll be in correction, and then we want to see a push up towards 423, potentially a lot higher, because our minimum targets are, or our maximum targets are around about 480. So I feel like we're starting the unwind from tech into more defensive stocks, and Lockheed Martin will be a great target for that market. Microsoft continues to look like our short trade is playing out. This was our number one pick for the beginning of the month to get short Microsoft, and we're already down about 7% from the highs, and the structure just looks really good for us to see a push lower towards 180, which is our minimum target, and our full target of 160. Going into the lower time frames, trying to find an entry. I feel that we had this big correction, this big running, big expanding flat, and we're in a really interesting area now to potentially just put an entry order below these lows, 200 maybe. If you want to be riskier, risky entry at 200, conservative entry below the lows at 197, because obviously it's a dangerous area when you see a push lower, you go into a flat pattern, and then you see another push lower that is exactly 1 to 1. That all could be a sign that is all just corrective for more upside. And if you go back to the higher degree time frames, you'll see we never actually met our full target of the impulse higher. We only got to the 0.786 region, and we could still go and test that 223 region of the full target. So keep an eye on this one. Still believe we're going to be short. Still believe the short is the way to go. We could just test the highs once again, kind of like the S&P, similar situation. Northrop Grumman is another good looking trade. As you can see, if we go into the higher time frames, we have had this impulse correction, impulse ABC, although this B wave is really not much of a corrective pattern. It's enough to call it a B wave, but what's more interesting to me is what's happened on the lower time frames, where we've had this impulse higher and we've gone into a bit of a chop here, and it looks like this is forming a bit of a running flat for more downside. We've already reached the minimum target of around about 315, and I'm not saying we've turned here, but it looks to me like we're going to look for a turn and push towards those lows at 262 to form a bit of a B wave running or B wave correction. And then once again, we should see the C wave coming into play. So all of this just looks like it is corrective, and there is some decent intraday trades to be had as part of this correction. So if you start to see a turn here, definitely you want to get short for a move down to 263 at those lows, and then you want to see a turn to the upside to trade that C wave to the upside. Depending where we end, it may be 340, 350 is our upside target of that trade. So some good trades up and down. Netgear, another one of our trades that we were looking at the beginning of the month and played out really beautifully. We had a push lower, and then we just took off to the upside. What we're looking at now is that we've reached the 0.786 retracement, and we've started to pull back. So this isn't one to really trade. It's just to say that this really did play out nice and cleanly for us, and we've reached our mid target at 32. Potential another push higher towards 34, but we've reached our full target, or we've reached our mid target, and it's all about seeing where to from here. Riot Blockchain Technology, interesting looking chart just for a shorter term time frame. As you see, we've had this strong impulse down. We've gone into what looks like a triangular pattern, A, B, C, D, E, and we're pushing lower from here. So I would say entry order below these lows is not such a bad idea. Stop above the highs, and you could see a move down towards kind of $1.26, which is quite a decent move if it plays out. Taking a look, it's a good 36% short to the downside. So really good looking chart for a short-term trade to the downside. From there, potentially you want to get long to the upside and retest of the highs at $3.32. So we have to see how it plays out. But for now, short-term short on the cards. Save, Spirit Airlines, very similar to Boeing, playing out in the same manner without the triangle, or you can call it a triangle. Anyway, any break of 16 to the downside should pay off handsomely down towards 12. From there, you should see another rally up to complete the triangle or complete the corrective phase of this move, and then a push lower. So definitely you want to be short anything to do with the airlines at the moment. So keep an eye on that. TripAdvisor, not a great structure in terms of the correction, but a really nice impulse down, and we've gone into a corrective structure. So have to take a look at what exactly we're looking at here. Conservatively speaking, anything that breaks this trend line to the downside and gives you a decent entry correction is something you want to short to the downside. So this is a really nice impulse to follow it or to precede the action. So it's a really nice downside target. Probably going to go test the lows again at 1389. So keep a close eye on that. Tesla, Another one we called for short. We said it was going to be a big move down. We're already down 20%, and we've actually hit our minimum target already. Given the structure, it's been a crazy B wave, and we've come down and we've hit our minimum target. I don't think we've come the whole way. I think we're still going to see some more moves. We've definitely got some gaps that need closing around about 1135. So I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to the downside on Tesla. It's just about finding a good entry on the lower time frames. At the moment, there's nothing really there. Similar to Microsoft, you might want to trade this as a flag, and any break to the downside, getting into the short side on that. Or you can put an entry order at 1361. And finally, moving on to Tyson Foods. We've had this impulse up, and then you've gone into this long, drawn-out, choppy correction. Really nice, clean, corrective move. And we've had a push off the lows, and going into the hourly, you see we've gone into this corrective structure over here. So any break of this, you definitely want to get long. So kind of entry orders above 62 or at the 62 region should pay off handsomely for a full move target of 80. So really nice move up from 60. You could get a good 25, 26% out of this move higher. So this is one of the trades to look for this week. And obviously coming into earnings could be a good indication that there's going to be a nice push higher for us for Tyson Foods. And looking at the higher degree time frame, as you can see, what we're looking at is kind of this expanding triangle trade, which means 80 might not be our minimum target. It could actually, or might be our target. It could get up to 95 and go break the highs. So it's just a really good looking long trade with a really good entry order, or good entry for us at around about the 60 region. So keep an eye on that as a good trade, a nice long to the upside. So yeah, that's our watch list this week. We'll catch up with it on Thursday, see how things have played out. But yeah, things look really good to get long a couple of things, but mostly short to the downside, especially in the broader market. Have to see how things are playing out. We're already starting to see a rejection of this 3230 region, and we'll have to see how that plays out moving forward. Cool, guys. Have a good one. We'll chat to you on Thursday.